Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. I remember attending a retirement celebration many years ago. Before the meal, the pastor was about to offer a prayer, but he made some comments first. At the time, digital watches were all the rage, but he spoke about how he preferred the old analog style watch with a second hand. Looking at that watch, he said, you could see the sweep of time. Then he pointed out that we were there to celebrate the sweep of time for the person's career. We are doing something like that this week in these morning moments together. We typically hear large Bible stories only in snippets on Sunday mornings, things we lift out of the more full, larger story. So it is that we know parts of the story, but we sometimes lose how it fits in with the wider story and the shape of the narrative of the person's whole life and ministry. So this week, we are simply looking at the story of St. Paul from beginning to end, in some ways putting the pieces together in order for us to get a greater understanding of his journey of faith and life with and for Christ. Yesterday, we went through his early life and up through his conversion to Christianity and being accepted by the believers in Jerusalem. That's where we begin today. The time after Paul was converted is shrouded a bit in mystery. There is one reference that he went to Arabia for at least 3 years, with some speculation that he spent time meditating at Mount Sinai. There is little information about the next 11 years or so, as some believe Paul continued to learn about Jesus. All his life, Paul asserted that he received the gospel message he preached directly from Jesus and not from other people. Eventually, Barnabas found him, and together they went to Antioch, a cosmopolitan city with a Christian community of people open to the Greek world. In fact, it was in Antioch that the followers of Jesus were first called Christians. In AD 45 to 46, there was a severe famine, and Paul and Barnabas journeyed to Jerusalem to deliver financial aid that had been collected in Antioch, establishing a pattern that Paul would follow for the rest of his life. On their return to Antioch, Paul and Barnabas were commissioned to go on what became known as the first missionary journey, which was led by Barnabas. They left Antioch intent on preaching and teaching the gospel in the wider world. They began in Cyprus, and after that a young man with them named John Mark left them and returned home. He is likely later to become the author of the Gospel of Mark. Paul and Barnabas went on into southern Asia Minor to a city in Turkey called Perga and later Pamphylia. On the Sabbath, they went to the synagogue there and they were invited to speak. Paul started with King David, showed how Jesus was descended from King David, spoke about his death and resurrection, and proclaimed that Jesus was the promised Messiah God had sent to bring them forgiveness of their sins. The people were intrigued and invited them back to speak again the next Sunday. At that time, almost the whole city gathered to hear them. However, some influential Jews of the city spoke against them, and it became one of the most significant events you've never heard of. In light of this opposition, Paul announced that from here on, he would take the message of Christ not just to the Jews alone, as had been the practice, but also to Gentiles. This simple, dramatic moment reshaped the missionary movement and indeed all of Christianity. Now, the news of Jesus would be offered to everyone. Most scholars believe that this missionary journey took place between the years 46 and 49, and that after that, Barnabas and Paul returned to Antioch for an undetermined time. Now let me be clear. Before this first missionary journey, it was thought that followers of Jesus had to be Jews first before they became Christian. In one moment, Paul opened himself and his purpose up to tell anyone and everyone about Jesus. It is an important shift, one of which we are all beneficiaries. And the question for us is this: if Paul could be so open to people so different from him and who were normally excluded, who do we tend to exclude? And how can we become more open to them as brothers and sisters in God's family? Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.